Remember that smartphone we were discussing in our last lesson? Well, turns out that it's really popular among teens. But recently, there's been some disturbing news about the product. It seems that some of the mines that produce the metals needed for the processor cause some pretty serious pollution. And the factory where the phones are assembled has some pretty serious safety issues. That's not even taking into consideration some of the issues with the apps on the phone. Reports show that there has been a rise in cyberbullying. Not everything about this hot new product of globalization is great. Now, in the grand scheme of things, smartphones may be a relatively new development, but globalization isn't. In fact, globalization has impacted economic development for a long time. During the Middle Ages and Renaissance, spices and textiles moved from what is modern-day China to the Mediterranean along the Silk Road. Beginning in the 1500s and lasting all the way into the 20th century, European nations colonized the Americas, Asia, and Africa, largely in order to obtain resources necessary to fuel economic growth. The years after World War II were defined by the impact of American goods reaching new markets across the globe. In each of these cases, there was increasing interaction and integration between people, companies, and governments in different parts of the world. You know, globalization. Let's check in for a minute. How might studying historical examples of globalization help us better understand globalization in the 21st century? Take a second to answer that question and meet me back here. Well, studying these historical examples can help us better predict some of the unintended consequences of modern globalization. We can use this knowledge to help minimize the negative effects of globalization. Now, in yesterday's lesson, we discussed the economic impact of globalization. But globalization changes much more than economic structures. It changes how we live in and interact with the world around us. There's a distinct chance you have some clothes that were manufactured overseas and sold in America. Maybe there's a place near you where you can buy snack food from different countries. Or you can hop onto the internet and see what's happening on the other side of the world, or interact with people living on a different continent. As trade networks and supply chains increased in distance and spanned oceans, corresponding leaps in technology and communication accompanied globalization. Developments in shipping, railroads, and planes made transporting goods over long distances much easier, helping to meet increased demand. Telegraphs, telephones, and eventually the internet helped people communicate over long distances, which helped better coordinate economic activity. Globalization also impacts culture. As populations in different parts of the world interact with one another, they participate in cultural exchange, influencing food, art, music, religion, and literature. Cultural exchange can be as simple as accessing television shows from other nations, like British crime shows or anime from Japan. But the process of globalization also means that our metaphorical footprint has exponentially increased in size. Purchasing that t-shirt manufactured in Bangladesh or the television from South Korea means that our choices impact people we may never even meet by dictating working conditions in other parts of the world. Plus, those same choices can have massive environmental repercussions. Sure, that new cell phone is a great product at a great price. But what if rivers, lakes, and other water sources ended up full of toxic chemicals as companies mined for the metals necessary to make different parts for the phone? It's not fun or even easy to consider how our economic choices impact people in every corner of the world. But our ability to impact other parts of the world also means that it is more important and more difficult being an educated consumer. The further we are from the production of the goods and services we purchase, the easier it is to overlook the impact of our decisions. But if it were children in your town working in dangerous conditions to assemble that smartphone, you might not be able to ignore it, and you may even make the decision not to purchase the phone until the company changes its practices. Some people believe that the impact of globalization should only be measured in terms of economic impact. How would you respond to that idea? While globalization is an economic process and has important economic impacts, it is important to remember that it also impacts all aspects of our daily lives. It can lead to cultural exchange and advances in communication. Plus, it has huge implications for the environment and society, requiring us to be better informed consumers. As the pace of globalization and the changes that accompany it increase, opinion on whether globalization is a positive or negative is divided. But why is globalization such a hot button issue? What about the increasing connection between people living in different parts of the world is so controversial? Take a second to predict the answer to that question. And don't worry if you don't have the perfect answer. You'll have a chance to refine it at the end of the section. Well, globalization is like so many other economic forces in that not everyone experiences it the same way. A smartphone user may love all of the features and how easy they make it to communicate, enjoy entertainment, and shop. But what if you work in an industry that is seeing job cuts due to the rise of smartphones? Plus, it isn't always clear whether the benefits outweigh the trade-offs. Let's say the production of parts for the smartphone results in pretty serious environmental issues. For some people, that trade-off far outweighs the benefits of smartphones. And because globalization's impact goes far beyond just economics, people may be uncomfortable with some of the changes that globalization leads to. Globalization has led to people being displaced from their jobs. Other folks have migrated in order to better meet their needs and wants. Older products have been forced out of the market. Traditional methods of production have disappeared. For some people, these impacts fundamentally change their worlds, and that can be disorienting. But who's right? Is globalization a positive or negative? Well, truthfully, there is no right answer. Globalization has both benefits and drawbacks. The reality is that we need to accept that fact and center our discussions about globalization around maximizing benefits while minimizing the drawbacks. Let's pause for a second while you refine your answer to the question I asked at the beginning of the section. Okay, let's take a quick minute to talk about what we covered today. Globalization is not a new phenomenon. In fact, there are many historical examples of people from different parts of the world interacting with each other through trade, exploration, and conquest. And while globalization is primarily an economic process, it has impacts far beyond just the economy. Globalization can change the way we live our daily lives, as well as expose us to new and diverse cultures. It changes how we communicate with each other and changes our environment. But most importantly, it requires us to be more educated and engaged consumers to ensure that our impact is not detrimental to people in other parts of the world. We've also talked about how globalization doesn't always have clear right and wrong decisions. The unintended consequences of globalization might mean that the cost of an economic decision may far outweigh the benefits. And because of this, globalization is a highly sensitive topic. Tomorrow, we'll begin to look at the mechanisms of globalization, starting with imports and exports. But until then, keep investing in yourself, one lesson at a time. See you next time.
Hey!